Dr. Shanna Swan. It's so great to see you again. So great to have you on. We've done a couple videos that have really gotten a lot of attention, and I'm so grateful for your work and so grateful to work with you. So welcome onto the
Thank
podcast.
you. Thank you, Mark. And it's a pleasure to see you again. And I'm really happy that so many people got to see those videos and got to learn a little bit about these exposures and how they might decrease their personal exposure. So that's good. That's what I want to do. Yeah.
That's great. Probably out of all the videos I've done hundreds of topics, that topic that you've covered, I probably get the most feedback, and I think that's probably changed people's behavior the greatest. I had
Wow.
people
Wow.
telling me that they got rid of all their plastics in their house when they were trying to have a baby, things like, no more microwaving in plastics, that's all gone. Huge lifestyle changes. They're really looking at the labels in the back of products now, becoming a
That's
lot more
great. That's
conscious.
great. It's a great start. As we can talk about later, it's not going to solve all the problems, right? But it's certainly a good start, and it's a good way that people can take some control over their own lives and do something about these problems. Yeah.
Yeah, you've done an amazing job of bringing this huge topic that affects us all to the forefront of our awareness. And just real quick, to kind of catch up anybody listening who hasn't seen those videos, maybe we could kind of quickly just do an overview of this huge decline that we're seeing in sperm count.
Sure. So, yeah, brief history. 92 study out of Denmark saying there was this huge decline. And I and many people said, wait, whoa, this can't be, it can't be this bad. There must be other things going on that's making it look bad, right? And, that's what we do in my field, epidemiology. So we try to look for other things that mask as this finding. So for example, maybe that more recent studies had older men who have lower sperm count, or maybe they're more obese men who have lower sperm count, or maybe they're selected to be men with low sperm count, maybe donors who are, or people coming to have their sperm tested because they're worried. Well, they're going to be lower, and so on. There's a lot of things like this. So I and others work really hard to see if we could make this go away. So we've seen a decline. We questioned it. Could we make it go away? Bottom line, no. And I tried to do it for, maybe 5 years repeatedly, trying different kinds of studies, were the studies selected biased? Were the men biased? Were so on and so forth. And finally I said, wow, this is real. Okay. And that was the turning point for me, right? Because okay, if it's real, what is it? And what's causing it, right? And so I started asking that question and looking. I had a study in which we had selected men in 4 cities in the United States. And it turned out that men who were living in an agricultural area where there's a lot of spraying had half as many moving sperm as men in Minneapolis. That's huge, right? Half as many moving sperm. And they weren't actually farmers. They were just living in Columbia, Missouri, in this environment where this stuff can get in the water and the air and so on. And they were bad off, in terms of just, right? And then we actually went one step farther and we looked in their urine for these pesticide metabolites. And sure enough, more pesticides, poorer semen quality. So that was a long time ago, but it was really kind of convincing that environment mattered. That was the bottom line. So the first bottom line is the decline seems to be real. Second bottom line is environment matters. Okay. And so now we fast forward to about 2015 when a colleague and friend of mine, Icahn Levine, and I were talking at a meeting, and he said, that old study from 1992, we should update that. I was like, okay, that's a good idea. And so we started to do that. And we put a group together and we did something which was much more ambitious than that 1992 study, because we wanted to do the whole world, the whole literature, consistently by the books, publish protocols ahead of time and all this stuff. And that study, which came out in 2017, was the next big step, because it was, first of all, very solid methodologically, and it showed that the decline that had been reported from in 1992 was still going on and was actually stronger than we had originally thought, but it's about close to the same, 1% per year. So 1% per year in 50 years means cutting in half sperm count, right? And that was pretty alarming. And that kind of made big headlines. That was the sort of the first big headline about this. Hey guys, you're half the man your grandfather was. That's some one of our colleagues went to Congress and said that. Wow. And we have a video of that. And so I've been tracking that ever since. And we thought recently, much more recently, well, that's old. Maybe we should update that. And maybe now we'll see more studies from countries that didn't sort of stand up to be counted in that earlier analysis. So it turns out that most of our data for the first analysis was from North America and Europe. And that's where all these studies have been for years and years and years, back to 1992 and before. And that's because to do these studies, you have to have a lab, right? You have to have a certain level of scientific sophistication. You have to have a population that's interested in the question, so they participate. And you have to have a population where it's okay for men to give a semen sample, which is not always the case. So all of these things have to be in place, and that's true in North America, most places, in Europe, most places. And that's where most of our data came from. This new analysis, which is out just a year, came out in, I think, October or November 22, changed that story. Because for the first time, and maybe because countries were reacting to the earlier 2017 publication, there were many more studies from Asia, South America, and Africa, which were countries that we couldn't say anything about. We didn't have enough numbers in the first study. So in the second study, we found, yes, there was a significant decline in sperm count worldwide, everywhere we looked, every continent. Okay. And the other thing we asked was, well, okay, what's happened since the last study? Have things changed? Have things gotten better? That was our hope. And actually, things had gotten a lot worse. And that was the second big message of that 2022 paper. When we looked at the decline from the beginning of our study period, which is back to 1973, the decline was, like I said, about 1% per year. When we looked since 2000, the decline was more than 2% per year.
Wow.
So every time we look at this, it gets worse. And this is kind of scary, because our exposures that I feel are driving this to a large extent are not getting less. In fact, if anything, they're probably increasing. And we're having drops in fertility worldwide, which are really dramatic. Also about 1% per year, and probably now increasing. So there's other consequences we can talk about, but I'm going to stop there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So this kind of makes me think about doomsday predictions. What is the forecast of the future? Are we looking at going to zero sperm count?
Yeah, I would say that's a good question. And no, the thing that we plot is an average, right? And if you think of any average, like average weight and average height, they're bell-shaped. Everyone knows that, I think. There's a bell shape. And what we report is the center of that bell, the middle, the median, average. And And so if you think about that bell, if that average was at 0 for anything, whether it was height or weight or sperm count, that would mean that some of the numbers would be negative and some would be positive, right? But you can't have negative weight or height, and you can't have negative sperm count. So in fact, the distribution of sperm count is not bell-shaped. Okay, it's actually very what we call skewed. It has a big hump and then it tapers off with a long tail. You see what I mean?
I see.
So,
Okay.
so what if the hump, if the highest point, the median were at 0, then you'd have half the men would have negative sperm count. It's not possible.
Right. Okay.
Right? We can come closer and closer to 0 for that mean or median, but we can't reach it. So that's one thing about 0. Don't look for 0. We won't see 0, but we will see and are seeing more and more men going into the area of subfertility. We can talk about fertility and subfertility, but so there was a paper a long time ago that was very, very good and never been improved upon as far as I know, where what they did was they took couples who were trying to get pregnant for the first time, not using contraceptives, and they got the men's sperm count, and then they saw how long it took them to get pregnant. All right? Is it straightforward? That's called time to pregnancy. That's a variable you can find out. How long were you trying? That's the time to pregnancy. So it turns out that obviously, the higher the sperm count, the shorter the time to pregnancy, right? But what they found was that when you get not all that low, if you get below, and I can send you that paper if you want a picture of it. As you get closer below 50 and closer towards 0, of course, 0, you can't. Time to pregnancy is infinite. You can't get pregnant. So what they reported was the probability of getting pregnant in any 1 month. Okay. And it turned out that when you got below a sperm count below around 45, it's not precise because it gradually falls off. It gets the time it takes to get pregnant, or the probability of conceiving in any 1 month, goes down to 0. So it's just going to take people longer and longer to conceive. And we're already we were at 47, well below that now. I can't remember where we are now, but we're definitely in the subfertile range for the average man in our studies.
When we're looking at that bell curve, what are the commonalities of the men that are on the lower part of that bell curve that have super low subfertility? Is there anything linking that cohort together?
Oh, it's so varied. There can be lifestyle factors that put you down there. You're couch potato, you smoke a lot, you drink a lot, you're going to be much more likely to be down there. It's probabilities, right? You could have physical problems, you could have something called a varicocele or blockages or things that physically get in the way of the sperm being produced or getting out. And you can have exposures that you're not aware of the kind, which is the kind I study, which is like the chemicals in plastics and so on. So the only way I can answer that is with a study, and we have studied a number of factors, but pesticides, I told you, if the man is exposed to these pesticides, which were mostly the triazines, so atrazine and other similar chemicals, they're going to be much more likely to be in the lower part of that curve. Yeah. And by the way, we studied count, how many in this big analysis, because why don't we just do count? Because there are many parameters. So count, first of all, it's an easy one to understand. It's just a number, how many. And secondly, there's a standard for counting it, which has not changed over the whole course of our studies. It doesn't matter the name. It's a hemocytometer. It's a very simple device, originally used to count white blood cells, I think back in 1912. So it's not a high-tech device. There are more high-tech ways of counting. There are computer counts, but those have changed over time. So we don't want to use anything changing where the methods was changing, because then you couldn't tell if it was real a biological change or a methodological change, you see? So we stuck with this one thing, hemocytometer, and that's the standard by the World Health Organization. That's what they say should be used in this and this way. There's a manual how to use it. And so the studies we included used WHO method, including hemocytometer. Now, when you go to other things that you can learn about a sperm, like, does it have two heads? Some do. Does it have two tails? Some do. Is it round instead of oval? Yes. Those are things that can happen. That's called shape or morphology, right? And any sperm sample, there's an evaluation of the percent of sperm that are normally shaped, right? And actually, that's pretty low. It's like average about 12%. I mean, it's not a lot. And we haven't looked at whether that's changed over time, because those methods have also changed. You see the problem? Yeah. And the third thing you could look at is, are they swimming? Are they moving? They're not moving, they're not going to deliver the goods, right? So, and how are they swimming? Well, if they just swim around in circles, that's not going to get you anywhere. So the motility, as it's called, that's also given a number. And it turns out that all of those things, the count, the morphology, the motility, have to be of certain quality to result in a pregnancy. So those things tend to be correlated. So I would suspect that they've also declined, but I don't know because we can't study it. Yeah.
Is it possible that for one of these really weak, poorly formed sperm to actually impregnate the egg or actually fertilize
Oh,
it?
yeah. I mean, everything is possible. I mean, I have a friend, his son had a cancer when he was 13. He banked his sperm before chemotherapy, but he was told when he was in his 20s that he would never be able to impregnate his wife. And they now have a child.
Because of that sperm that he froze?
Actually, no, he was able to produce a sperm that conceived a very nice child. So, I mean, I would say to people, don't give up. It's not impossible. It's just going to take longer. It might be impossible, but, I mean, men who have zero sperm cannot get pregnant. There's no question about that. And obviously, as you get a bigger and bigger, number, it gets more and more likely. By the way, this is an interesting thing. If you look at the probability of conception, or how long it takes to get pregnant, or however you want to measure it, after a certain point, it doesn't matter. So whether you have 60 million per milliliter or 100 million per milliliter, that doesn't seem to make a difference. So if you have more than enough, the rest, the big numbers are not really going to be relevant. But yeah, it's a probability game, right? I mean, you have to keep trying. Now, by the way, getting pregnant is not simply a function of the male, right? So the woman's control. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but the woman is also subject to the same exposures and environmental exposures, and for some of them more cosmetics and more chemicals in their personal care products and things like that. You probably have more contact with chemicals in food containers and, you know, Teflon pans and things like that. So, you know, they're certainly important. And, you know, I think, you know, you have to look at what is the level of exposures in both the male and the female if you want to know whether these are contributing to risks of infertility.
Yes, I'd love to hear about the female side of this as well.
Okay. First of all, you know that forever women were blamed when a couple couldn't get pregnant. I just want to say that it was always considered it was her fault. And there, you know, King Henry VIII, anecdotally, you know, had 3 wives put to death because they couldn't produce a son for him. Obviously, it must be their fault. It couldn't be his, right? So off of their heads.
Yeah. Wow.
So, you know, most men are not that punitive, but women do bear a lot of sense of guilt for not getting pregnant or for miscarriage. And I'll just share with you, I had multiple miscarriages and did feel responsible. And I know that's very, very common that women, what did I do wrong? I can't give him a child, you know, kind of thing, which is ridiculous because it's a shared venture, you know, both parties participate, both parties contribute, and both parties can have problems. And now we know that infertility is about 50-50 shared between males and females. So about 40% are male factors, 40% female factors, and the rest is shared factors or unknown factors. So yeah, we're all in this, we're all contributing to this problem. The chemicals, the work on the female side is much more limited. And the reason is you can count sperm, you can see their shape, you can see their, you know, motility, but you can't do that with eggs. So to get an egg count is you have to do a sonogram, and it's difficult. And so we just don't have the same information. The advantage for men is that it's kind of all out there. You can see everything, and that's, I guess, good and bad. But in terms of identifying problems, it's good because you can see there's a varicocele that's hanging out, the testicle is swollen, you know, or you can see, you know, and then you can, of course, get the semen and see that way. So, but for females, it's much more difficult. And so there have been fewer studies on the female end. But miscarriages have been going up. We don't have nearly as much information on that as we do on the men. And one reason is that, well, first of all, miscarriage is male-female contribution, so we can't say it's a female. And I did lots of miscarriage studies, and the problem is a lot of miscarriages are silent. They happen before you even know you're pregnant. And the only way you can know that is if you did the kind of study we and a few people did, which is to collect many blood samples and look for hormones in the blood. And then there's a hormonal pattern that appears only when you've had a miscarriage, and you can see that. So the woman, if she didn't have this marker, she would just say, oh, I missed my period, or I had a late period, but she might have had a miscarriage. You see, so if you're going to go study miscarriages, what are you going to study? Right. And so what we and others did was say, well, we'll only count it as a miscarriage if she had a positive pregnancy test. And then she didn't. Right. So, or we call it medically confirmed miscarriage. So those we've shown were related way long time ago, was related to things in the water, solvents in the water was affecting the rate of miscarriage and so on. So there's lots of studies on that. But the fertility question is really difficult on the female side.
Yeah, on our first couple of videos, one of the most common comments that I saw throughout is a lot of people don't see this as a problem. A lot of people say, oh, wow, this is a good thing. You know, less people, less problems. And I would love it if you could kind of speak on why this is something we should be concerned about, why this may not be a good thing.
So, Mark, that's has so many different answers, and they're all important, I think. The first thing is to know, and this has only been known in the last, I would say, 10 years, that a man who has a low sperm count, or maybe he's infertile and he may or may not have a low sperm count, a woman's infertile, decreased fertility and reproductive function is tied to a shorter life expectancy. And this has been shown now, numerous studies, large studies, all over the world. So that's not debatable there. And you might think, well, how does that work? How having a low sperm count, what would that have to do with my age of death, right? It seems totally, well, the answer is that the drivers of poor sperm count or poor reproductive function often occur in the womb. And that's something that people don't realize. But what your mother was doing and the exposures that she had and the stressors that she had and her smoking and so on and so forth when she was pregnant with you are going to affect your reproductive function as an adult. That's mind-blowing, kind of, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So at the time that things are being disturbed in the womb, it won't be only the germ cells that are going to make the babies later. It's also going to interfere with various other functions like cardiometabolic function and immune function. And there's a lot of, they are common, they share common risk factors. Okay, so take smoking. So smoking is going to mess up lots of things if you're exposed in utero or in adult life, and not just reproduction. It'll also, mess up these other things are going to affect your longevity. So it's not like having a low sperm count is going to make you die younger. It's a signal, a marker that something went wrong earlier, and that probably other things went wrong. So that's one reason why we worry about this, that if we see sperm count going down, we're going to see, other things going down. And that's been happening as well. So that's one reason that we should worry about this. Another reason is just a justice thing that I view, and many people view, the right to have children if you wish, and that's a big if you wish. That's a right that people have. And to have that taken away because of exposures that we didn't ask for, we're not even aware of, is infringement on those rights. And that's another reason why it's not okay. And yeah, I mean, I don't know your personal situation, but I talked to so many people who have tried unsuccessfully to become pregnant, and it's, by the way, it hits disadvantaged communities more. So poor, underserved communities are going to be more impacted by chemicals, and they don't have the wherewithal to make safer choices. For example, suppose one of the things I recommend is that people buy fresh food if they can. Okay, unprocessed fresh food. Go to the farmer's market if you have one, or go to a supermarket if they have fresh produce, and buy that and take it home, cook it, and eat it. You bypassed all of the storage questions, or all of it, in a good pan, right? In a non-PFAS treated pan. And so if you are living in a poor neighborhood, which has only these mega stores, you won't have the farmer's market, you won't have the produce. They're called food deserts. So if you're living in a food desert, you can't make these changes.
Right. A lot of places, the gas station is the grocery store.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that horrible?
Terrible. And they, if you don't have the means to afford this really high-end care or these tools to
Right.
get pregnant when it's difficult, you're just out of luck.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
But so it definitely is a socioeconomic issue, big time.
Big time. And so it's, in some ways, it's a justice issue, as well as a reproductive issue. And I don't think we talked about that a lot. I'm becoming more aware of that, and I'd like to, I'm moving into emphasizing that, because I think, it's important. Yeah, and it's so I care a lot about that. Yeah.
Wow, it seems like there's just so many different factors at play here. And just to even conduct one of these studies, there's so many hurdles to get over. It's amazing that you pulled it off, because there's a stigma around even giving a sample.
Yeah.
I think I haven't given a sample, and I don't think I really even know a single one of my friends. I don't even ask them, but there is a stigma around. Every guy thinks that their sperm's perfect. They're not going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my recommendation to every guy who has never given a semen sample is that you should do it. And the reason is that, first of all, you might not ever want to get pregnant, but who knows? Okay. So it'd be good to know ahead of time if you're reasonably okay, right? But also, if you're not, then you can think about why not? And are there things that can be done? There's treatments, and, maybe there's a problem that needs to be fixed. And you might learn something about your life expectancy. I mean, so I just think it's just like you get your cholesterol checked and you get your blood pressure checked. Why wouldn't you get your sperm count checked?
Well, I think I actually may know the answer to that. There's that psychological experiment called I think it's called Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
Where you have a box with a cat in it, and there's poison in the box, and as long as you don't open the box, the cat is both alive and dead.
Right.
So it's like you don't want to open that box, because once you see the cat's dead, you've kind of killed the cat.
Right. But this is different. This is different because in this situation, there might be something you can do about it. The cat might be just sick.
Good point. That's a great point.
You could help it along, right? So I highly recommend that. I also recommend, and this is expensive. I mean, that's not free either, but if you don't want to get pregnant now and think you might in the future, it's probably a good idea to bank your sperm, because semen quality does go down with age, not rapidly, not like same problems in women, are much more rapid decline with age, but
Is
men,
it does it kind of plateau for a while and then it starts to
yeah.
in your 30s,
For men, it's just a gradual decline. It's a plateau, and then it's very gradual. For women, it's like 35 to 40. That's the yeah. So it's really different. But aside from the cost of banking the sperm, which is not negligible, and as I say, not equally affordable by everybody, why not? Why not? It doesn't hurt you in any way. It doesn't damage the sperm to freeze it. And then you have it available if you want it in the future, because you never know.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to have a kid of my own in the next year or so. So yeah, this topic is of utmost concern, and I'm really curious about it. And so I understand that you're working on something new, that new experiment about couples. And I was
Yeah.
really curious about it.
Yeah, so let me give you a little background. So the way science is done has always been done forever, it seems. What is to write a grant, submit it to an agency, usually a federal agency, could be state, and it's reviewed, and then if you're lucky, successful, you get funding and you conduct the study. Okay, So just to give you an idea, that takes from the time you say, oh, I should do a study on this, to when you actually get the money. I don't know what the average is, but I would say that's probably 4 or 5 years, because you don't get it the first time often, and so on. So then it's a 5-year study, typically. And then, so that's 10 years. And then you have to get it published. So you were looking at, I would say, a 10-year window from when you ask the question to when you can get the information out. And I don't think we have all that much time, actually. And I started to think about ways that we could do these things faster. But the other thing that's wrong with the traditional model is that, where does the question come from and who is studied? And the question often comes from the scientific community, from the investigator, from the chair of the department, who says, oh, we need another study on this. We want, want to check this out, kind of thing. But it's not from the concerns of people. It's not from the concerns of people living near a power plant, or, drinking contaminated water, or, eating, off of PFAS coated pans. They're asking, if they're aware at all, what's this doing to my health? And that does not drive academic studies, by and large. Okay. And so the second reason I want to do this, use this new model, which I'll tell you what it is that the idea for the study can come from the affected communities. So we can say, oh, here are the firefighters, they're worried about the PFAS in their gear and in the spray that they use, and what is that doing to their fertility, which is a really good question, by the way. And so that study, which is actually a study that somebody is doing in California, is going to the union and saying to the union, oh, here are your guys that are concerned. Couldn't we work with you to enroll your members? So then it's collaborative, you see. Then the affected community is part of the process. And that's the kind of science I want to do. I want the people who are impacted to have a part in the research on their bodies. It makes sense? Okay, so here's an example. It's not 100% example because the idea didn't come from an affected community, but another one could, and the question is, are the chemicals in our bodies all the time, yours and mine and our friends, are those affecting your sperm count? And if I could look at it, I'd look at my eggs, although I'm old for that. but and if you were trying to get pregnant, are the chemicals in your body going to impact how long it takes you? Right? So that's a pretty simple idea. And there are many fertility groups that ask that kind of question, people who are concerned about fertility and want to know. So what we decided to do was to do what I'm calling intervention to promote action. That IPA happens to be a beer also, but so yeah, so these are meant to be short interventions. Unlike the 10 years for an NIH grant to be finished, we're going to get this over with in 1 year.
Wow.
And they're cheap. So the typical NIH grant will cost $300,000 to $500,000 or more, and these grants are going to cost $50,000 to $70,000. Okay, so that's fundable. They're organizations that, I've gotten some money from an organization. We want to help with the study. They can see the goal, they can see who's affected, they can see what you're doing, and it's affordable. Okay, so in this study, what we're doing is we're enrolling a small number of couples who have had problems getting pregnant. How did we find them? Well, it turns out that one of our collaborators has a company called Fellow. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a sperm testing company. And Fellow has, at the time we first went in, had 15,000 men who had given us semen sample, and they answered questions like, why did you want your sperm to be tested? If they say they wanted to get pregnant, that's pretty interesting. If they said they had trouble getting pregnant, then they were asked how long. And so for this study, we selected men who had tried for 6 months or more to get pregnant. So there are subfertile. 12 months or more is infertile, and this is subfertile. So we have these subfertile men, and they have to be with a partner, and they have to agree to be in the study. So what happens? What is happening? It's in real time right now. So these couples, the man has used a Fellow kit, this company Fellow. You can, I'm not advertising for them at all. There are other companies that do this, but if you pay X dollars, they'll send you a kit. You collect your sperm at home, which is much more pleasant than going into a clinic, and you send it in we're using a rapid, means of sending it. And then Fellow analyzes this. And they've shown that the quality of the analysis is just as good as if you did it in the clinic. So that's very important. That wasn't true for a long time. And then they are going to collect a urine sample, and their partner is going to collect a urine sample. And those are being sent to another company called Million Marker. And they're, again, not an endorsement, although I know them and like them. There are other companies that do this. And those samples are analyzed for 2 classes of chemicals, phthalates and bisphenols. And these are chemicals that I'm concerned about and others are concerned about because they affect the body's hormones. For example, androgen, which is the key one here. So that's happening.
But what is androgen?
Testosterone, sorry.
Okay.
Testosterone. Yeah. Testosterone. And testosterone is an androgen. There are others. Yeah. And so we've identified these 6 couples. They want to be in the study. And for this particular little experiment, the number is very small because these people are going to be filmed. They're going to be filmed as they go on this journey from starting to see what's in their body to 3 months later when they'll retake their sample and see if their levels have gone down. So why would the levels go down? Because we're going to tell them what they should and shouldn't do, like you started talking about it, don't microwave in plastic, and don't use plastic containers, and don't use wall fresheners that plug in the wall, and so on and so forth. But we're also going to send them products. So we're sending them a large box of products, which is other storage containers, other frying pans, other cosmetics, and before we do that, we have an interview with them where we actually say, okay, so tell me, what do you put on your face in the morning? And then it's on Zoom, and then the woman says, oh, here, this is what I use. And so we see what products they're using and what's in them, and then we can make recommendations specific for them, right? So it's a very intensive, small study with a potentially big impact. And they're going to do this, as I said, for 3 months, and they're going to be on an educational program along that administered by Million Marker, where they'll learn how to clean up their act. And hopefully at the end of it, who knows? They'll have their sperm retested. Maybe they'll get pregnant. Maybe they'll get pregnant in 6 months. We don't know, right? So that's the study, and it's kind of scary and interesting. I'm going to go to their homes. I'm going to go visit each of them.
Are they all based in the same location?
No, unfortunately. Well, I should say, fortunately, I think, because we didn't want a very local study. We wanted a national study. So we have somebody in Miami, we have somebody in Georgia, Minneapolis, Indiana, Southern California, and Northern California. Those are a lot
of traveling you're going to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're starting that in December. And it's very exciting. It's much, I did the other kind of study for very long time. And this is much more fun and potentially, interesting. And why 3 months? And you should know this because you said you might be trying in the near future. It takes 3 months to make a sperm. Your body produces sperm continually, but from start to finish, it's 3 months. And if that sperm is used to conceive a baby, you'd like it to be as healthy as possible, right? And so for the 3 months before you're going to actually try, you should follow my advice. Okay.
Please.
Okay. And in addition to the product reduction, which we have talked about, we can talk about again, I would advise you to, I'm sure you don't smoke. I'm sure you exercise. Stress is difficult to control, but that's actually important. And your diet. So I would avoid eating out as much as possible. And I would definitely avoid fast food. I would avoid processed food to the extent that you can.
Is that about the pesticides on the food?
It's not just pesticides, it's the chemicals that are involved in the processing. For example, here's a really simple example. They did an experiment in Europe where they took a cow, they milked it by hand, they measured the phthalates in the milk, none. They took that same cow, milked it with a milking machine, which has all these tubes, right? And they're made of plastic and they have phthalates in them. And they measured the phthalates in the milk, and there was tons of phthalates. So that happens whenever food is processed through a soft plastic tube. And you can think of lots of, tomatoes into spaghetti sauce and so on and so on and so forth.
Literally everything in the grocery store.
And then you have the linings of tin cans, which are bisphenol A, right? So to the extent that you can, do the ideal, which is get fresh food, cook it, eat it. That's it. That's ideal.
Okay, so
you can't always do that. You got to go, you want to go out sometimes. And restaurants, who knows?
Yeah. Okay, so go to the farmer's market if you can, exercise, and no microwaving and plastic, no fast food.
Avoid scent, things that smell nice or not nice for you. Okay.
So, like makeup,
scented laundry products, scented wall fresheners, scented things you hang in your car, anything that's scented is going to have phthalates and parabens in it. Yeah,
no deodorant, no perfume.
Yeah. Well, I can't say no deodorant. There may be clean deodorants. Yeah.
Okay, I thought I could have a good excuse.
Hold on 1 second. What? No, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, well, I thought I could have a very good excuse now if I, if I smelled like BO.
But I was just going to say there may well be deodorants that are fine. I don't know that. But let me just say something about it's important to read labels, yes, but manufacturers are not required to list many ingredients on the label. Some have to be listed, but many of them don't. And they're not controlled. They're not, there's only 5 chemicals that have been banned in the United States out of X thousand. I don't know what X is.
You mentioned Europe has banned like 1,300.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So Europeans do it much better. So I would, if you had the luxury of buying European products, you'd probably be somewhat better off. But, or going to, you could take a little trip, go live in Europe for a while.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's, we're behind. We're definitely behind. Yeah.
So how deep into the study are you with the couples?
Oh, well, they've sent in their sample. They've been chosen. They've agreed. They've signed consent. You have to do that, consent people, of course. And they've sent in their samples. And I think in the beginning of December, I'm going to start touring, going to their homes. Yeah.
So this will be the first visit of 2?
Yes. Yes. But they have other visits on Zoom from counselors who are talking to them about, how are you doing? Were you able to cut this out? Did you, have you switched to this product, and so on and so forth, seeing how they're doing. Yeah. We'll see.
It's going to be a really important film you're making, because I was searching around before our interview, and I didn't see a whole lot of great resources for couples that were having trouble getting pregnant. Didn't
Right.
see a lot
Right.
of videos on
Right.
YouTube, at least.
Right. And by the way, it's important. I want to stress, for both couple, not just the woman, the man as well. And if there happened to be a surrogate, it would be important for that person as well. So if it was understand? Okay. So anybody anybody that contributes their environment to the fetus is going to be important.
That's big.
So we'll see. I mean, this is a small sample. We could come up a bust. We could see no change, but I don't think so. I think we will, at the very least, see the change in body burden. Right? We'll see levels going down, because that's been shown before. There's a wonderful book called Slow Death by Rubber Duck. I'm not sure if we talked about it. Rick Smith. And he and another guy set up a lab in his mother's house. Some rooms that were clean, he just cleaned them up, nothing bad in it, no wall-to-wall carpet and no stuff. These are, flame retardants are a problem too. They're in wall-to-wall carpet and overstuffed sofas and so on. So he had this very clean environment, and he brought his levels down. They were very strict, what they were exposed to, and brought his levels down. You can read that in this very nice book. So we know it's possible to bring your levels down. He was a sample of, I think there were 2 of them. They both did it. And this will be not much bigger. This will be 6. But after that, if this works, then we can go to bigger studies and show this for more people.
So after a year of this, whatever the results are, you can justify it to do a much, much bigger study.
Hopefully.
Be great. Yeah, I'm excited, and I'd be happy to make an after school animation about this if you want, or lend my animation skills to your video.
Great. Yeah. Well, when I get the go ahead from the team that's doing this is a fabulous cinematography team, and I'm taking my cues from them, but based on their past experience, this could well be like an Oscar winner, because they have gotten Oscars for their Wow. So we'll see.
Great. Our other film that my animation was a part of with that other organization, I think we're up for a Emmy.
Great.
We applied to win an Emmy.
Right.
I don't know if we're nominated.
Is that we're all plastic people?
I think so.
Yeah, that is up for 2 Emmys, I think. Yeah.
Oh, so when do we?
I'm in that one too. Right.
Yeah. When do we find out if we won?
I don't know, but it's pretty exciting. Yeah. Rory Fielding.
Yes.
You're probably on that email chain too then. Yeah, that's great. I didn't realize that you were part of that too.
Yeah, I had no idea what the process of applying for an Emmy is, but every city in the country has like a chapter for winning an Emmy.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, that'd be really excited if we won.
Yeah.
So I have quite a few other questions. Oh, I wanted to ask you about birth control.
Birth control is an endocrine disruptor, but it's designed to be an endocrine, right? It's meant to disrupt your endocrine system so you don't get pregnant. So there are a lot of pharmaceuticals that are endocrine disruptors. Yeah.
So my question about birth control is it more difficult to get pregnant if you've previously been on birth control?
It may well take longer, but I think that extends for 6 months approximately. I'm not current on that literature. I used to work in that field actually, but looking at adverse outcomes in women who were taking birth control compared to not taking birth control. I did a lot of those studies, but this is a different thing, and I don't know, except that I know that it can delay conception, but not forever. You know, the other thing is, what's not studied enough, I think, is that sometimes women have breakthrough pregnancies. They get pregnant even though they're taking the pill. Maybe they didn't take it as strictly, you know, and then the fetus is exposed to those chemicals.
Wow.
That's a little bit alarming because these are potent endocrine disruptors. So there's, you know, if a woman or if a couple wants to get pregnant and they're using oral contraceptives, there has to be a clean line between stopping and trying to get pregnant. I would leave probably a month to, you know, I don't know what the recommendation is, but several months to make sure that there's no, you know, spillover or no of these chemicals to the fetus.
Wow. So yeah, you want to wait a couple months after stopping birth control before you try to have a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
This might be a sidetrack, but how does birth control affect your mood and your personality?
I don't know.
I've heard that it can dramatically alter or disrupt a relationship because it changes your personality. So if you're on birth control, you might be attracted to a partner that you might not be attracted to if you were off birth control. I've heard
I
things.
have no idea. It's an interesting hypothesis, but it's not in the area of, you know, it's not in my area. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess you could take that logic all the way down to something like deodorant. You know, if your partner isn't attracted to your natural BO, that's probably a sign that maybe you're not compatible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. That's the field of pheromones. And something my husband is very interested in, and I think it's really important. But again, it's not something that I study, so I wouldn't want to talk about it. Yeah. I mean, we could chat about it, but I have no expertise in that area. Yeah.
Right. I guess there's just so many things that I think we have today that interfere with our natural ability to pick a compatible person. You know, makeup, all these things throw us off of if all the variables were stripped away, would you still be attracted to this person and be compatible? And if the answer is no, then you're probably, you know, not supposed to be with that person. But
Yeah,
all
it's
the surgery,
interesting.
all the
Yeah.
hair dye,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
scent, and you know, it's creating this artificial human that you don't even know who you're really with until you strip
Yeah.
it away.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a philosophical idea. Another philosophical idea I thought about around this topic is it's kind of ironic that all these products that are hurting our endocrine systems now, a lot of these products were the things that allowed our population to get so big in the first place. You know, like could we be able to support a large population
Mm,
if we didn't have these pesticides and
mm.
plastic to deliver the food? So it's kind of like a catch 22, or it balances itself out. It's ironic to me that
Yeah.
the products that created our civilization are the things that are kind of destroying it in a way.
Yeah.
But,
I actually don't know the economics. I mean, I know that the companies say, you know, without these products, we wouldn't be able to feed the population. I don't know that. I don't know that that's true. I mean, I think you should talk to an economist. Um, you know, have you ever had an economist on your show?
I have, yeah,
Okay.
not on my podcast, but it's really interesting to hear the economic side of this population change because, like we've said in our other videos, there's not many young people now, and you have
Right.
this giant aging population, and they typically need a large workforce to support them.
Yeah.
And now you have this very small, like you were saying, it's kind of like an upside down pyramid
Right.
where there's this giant bulge at the top of old people, and there's no young people to support the labor force and the economy. And I think you can make that prediction pretty accurately. It's hard to predict the future, but seeing demographics and people that are 30 years old today, in 30 years they're going to be 60. That's very easy to predict. And
Right, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
I mean, we haven't talked about this, but I just want to mention, because we've talked about testosterone in one context, but what I haven't talked about, and I think you said you might want to talk about it, is that along with sperm count going down, testosterone is going down, right? And just keep in mind that the chemicals in make plastic soft, phthalates, they're one of the things they do, their action is to lower testosterone, right? So we're actually doing a study now, or my team that did the sperm decline study is doing a study worldwide of testosterone. So I can't talk to you about the answers because I don't know them yet, but we're in that process. But I do know from looking at papers and also anecdotally that use of testosterone replacement therapy in young men has skyrocketed. It's hugely increasing. And I know from our own study that these chemicals are associated with decreased libido. So, and I'll just give you a little bit of data, which is that in our TIDE study, these women were asked about their sexual frequency and satisfaction with their sexual life. And those who had higher levels of the chemicals that drive down testosterone in their urine reported poorer sexual satisfaction and lower frequency.
they had higher levels
They had higher levels of phthalates, lower levels of sexual activity.
the women.
So the phthalates are driving down testosterone, which is related to libido, which affects the sexual frequency. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a study in China. This is just one, and I'd love to see it replicated. These are men who manufacture bisphenol A. Okay.
Wow. So they're at the epicenter of this.
Yeah. So bisphenol A is estrogenic. Okay, but estrogen and testosterone are in a feedback loop, and so it's not good to increase for a man to increase his estrogen. And those men had reported increased erectile dysfunction. Okay, so haven't been a lot of studies about this area, but I think it's really important. We know anecdotally from Japan, which has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, that couples are not marrying. In fact, there's a phenomenon of women marrying themselves. Right. So that whole side of it, which we haven't talked about, which is I've just put under the heading of libido, ability to have sex, interest in sex, frequency, all that is much more difficult to study, you can imagine, but also appears to be affected. Yeah.
So with this decline in sperm count and decline in testosterone, are we also seeing a rise in erectile dysfunction at the same rate?
That's my prediction, given the reports from clinical settings and from studies of insurance companies, paying for supplemental testosterone. That's why young men take it, by and large. I mean, some take it for muscles, but most of them take it for erectile dysfunction. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're on supplemental testosterone, you don't make sperm. So it's a vicious cycle in a way.
Really?
Yeah.
So if you're a bodybuilder type or you're taking steroids, testosterone to
I'm not a urologist, and you'd have to talk to urologists about the physiology of this, but my understanding is that there may be some pharmaceuticals that can counter that, and some companies are trying to develop testosterone treatments that won't have that effect, but I don't know where that's at now. But it's a difficult area, let's just put it like that. That if you want to get pregnant, get a woman pregnant, I would say you don't want to take supplemental testosterone.
Wow. I've never taken it myself, but I've always thought that I might try taking it when I'm kind of way past my prime, like when I'm 60. Kind of like I would take it all the way till the end of my life, because I feel like once you start taking it, it's very difficult to get off it, right?
I don't know. Again, it's a clinical question that I would, but you should have somebody on your program who's a urologist. I can help you find somebody if you want.
I'd love to.
We'll
Yeah.
talk about this. Yeah. I think it's extremely important.
Have you seen the movie Fight Club? There's a scene right in the beginning of the movie where a former bodybuilder has giant breasts now because he took so much testosterone that now his body is countering that with estrogen.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
and I know that in the sports, a lot of times they catch professional athletes doing steroids by they find that they're on estrogen blockers. That's usually how they catch them, if is they
Yeah.
find estrogen blockers in their system. So it's an interesting balance between estrogen
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
testosterone.
Yeah.
When does that testosterone study conclude?
What does it conclude, or when does it conclude?
When does that conclude? When?
My colleagues are in Israel, so we're on hold, right?
Hmm.
You understand?
Yeah. I've heard of some other big studies about testosterone from out of Israel. Andrew Huberman was talking about one about how important sunlight is for testosterone.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an Israeli study. We have a team of 7 people, but Haggai Levine, who's my colleague and was a fellow with me, who was the lead author on the first 2 studies, will be the lead author in this study. And his graduate student is writing his PhD on this and doing the heavy lifting, in terms of analysis and so on. So, and then we have people from all over the world on the 7 people from different 7, all over. And regrettably, we haven't been able to meet in the last, since October 7th. Yeah.
So that whole testosterone study is on pause for now.
Well, I'm meeting with somebody next week on it, so it's starting to pick up again, but it's definitely slowed down, yeah, because of that.
Okay, well, similarly to the population response that less people means less problems, I've also heard people say, why do we want men with testosterone in the first place? That's been a common response is high testosterone males kind of lead to more problems in society, maybe more aggression.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that's an interesting hypothesis, and there is some argument that perhaps testosterone has declined over evolutionarily, that we're not as violent as we used to be, and there's this correlation between testosterone and violence. So, maybe this is a plus of our exposures. I can't speak to that, but I'm not ruling it out. It's it may be, yeah. But I would say to the man who's affected, for example, if I said to you, well, don't worry about it, your testosterone is going down, but that'll make you less violent, and so just go with it. You might not be happy with that, right?
No.
No.
And high testosterone is linked to a lot of good things, right?
Yeah.
High libido, low stress levels, more vitality,
Right.
bigger muscles,
Yeah.
more energy.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not completely negative or positive, but I think if you asked an individual like you, were you okay with your testosterone going down as a result of these exposures? You'd probably say no.
No, no, absolutely not. So what is that? Is it too early to talk about that testosterone study or?
Yeah, I can't talk about it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'd love to do a video on that when it's ready.
Okay,
So,
great.
why isn't this talked about more in the mainstream? This is such a big problem. You don't really hear too much about it.
I think people are embarrassed, not comfortable talking about sexual function, and there's so many other things that we have to talk about, right? I mean, now the whole world is in chaos. There's wars all over the place. The climate is in terrible shape. Politics is in terrible. There's just so many other things to talk about. That I think it just gets buried. I don't know what it would take to bring it up to the level of some of these other concerns, but they're not separate, by the way. I want to maybe we should just touch on this, that the chemicals in plastic are made from fossil fuels. So now what's happening with the decline in the use of fossil fuels for transportation and energy, heating, these companies are now starting making plants specifically for producing plastics. So, it's all part of the same story, but people see it as different stories. But and so, climate change is tied to health in obvious ways, deaths in hot, areas and so on. But now I think people should also see that it's tied to climate change through the production of plastic. I'm sorry, tied to health through the production of plastic, right? So yeah, so fossil fuels make plastic, affect health. Yeah,
It's all connected.
Yeah. So we have to put these together, and there are efforts to do that internationally, and hopefully we'll succeed and let people say, oh, wow, this is related to this, is related to this, and maybe why I can't get pregnant. Yeah, right.
It is wild to think that we may be living right now during the time when there are the most people ever.
Yeah.
If our
Yeah, kind of staggering. Yeah.
We're set to peak in like 2045, right?
Yeah.
Which is not too far away. And by 2100, I heard that Nigeria would have more people than China.
Wow. Yeah.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, and the younger generation, Generation Z, is a small generation compared to, there's a lot more millennials than Gen Z, and from what I'm hearing, they're not really having, millennials aren't having many kids. Gen Z's not having, I heard they're having way less sex than any other generation. So, this thing could come to a halt quite quickly.
But on a plus side, maybe we should just add that the technology, the biotech, is developing more and more ways for us to have children. In fact, there's a company that you might have heard of, and I can actually introduce you to somebody who's doing this. They're using stem cells to produce eggs, human stem cells, human eggs. So, and then I'm sure they can do that with sperm as well. So, there's maybe we're smart enough to, to get out of this through technology. I don't know, but that's kind of scary too. I think that we have to do that.
Yeah. Hopefully. Are you optimistic about the future?
Wow. Well, that's a very big question. I'm scared. I think that, I think that people who become alarmed and take action, if that happens, there's a lot of power. There's a lot of ability to motivate change, to make change. But as long as this is under the radar, and as you and other people I've talked to, like Joe Rogan, said, how come we don't know about this, right? And that question is still there. And as long as we have that question there, we're not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, I keep hearing from a number of people in the public sphere, when they come across your work, they're shocked. Andrew Huberman. Do you know Andrew Huberman?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's really popular. And I just heard him talking about how he saw you give a talk in Denmark. And
Oh, did he go to that? That was nice. Yeah.
oh, yeah, he said he was blown away. And it's such a big issue. It's amazing that we're not hearing about it because all you hear about is there's too many people on Earth. That issue kind of gets banged into your mind from day one.
Yeah, and those too many people on Earth never talk about the chemical footprint of those people. Yeah. Never. It's never talked about.
Yeah. I'm kind of the mindset.
They're kept apart. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always trying to see things as like, this is a difficulty, but is there opportunity in it? People say this is a problem, but is it really a problem down the road? Like, I'm always trying to see of like the bigger picture because you can zoom in and see a
The
problem,
eternal optimist, right?
or the pessimist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm the kind of person when things are going really well, I'm kind of like, okay, wait, something's going a little bit too good. Maybe I should look at what's wrong here. And then when things are
Right.
everybody's freaking out in chaos, I'm the one that wants to zoom out and say, okay, wait, this is actually a good thing. So
So Mark, I feel like we've been talking a long time, and I think I'd like to wrap up soon. Is that
yeah,
possible? Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your work, and I think that it's incredibly important. And so anytime you want to do a video, let me know.
Okay, thanks. That's a wonderful invitation. And I appreciate your work and all the views you've gotten and all the eyes you've gotten on this problem, which is going to help solve it, I think.
Absolutely.
So together, right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next time.